So the question is, can Amish ride in cars? So the answer for most Amish is yes. Amish do ride in cars. That can be, for example, hiring an Amish taxi, which is a non-Amish driver. Often they make a living driving the Amish places, driving them to the store, errands, when they need to go somewhere further than it's convenient for a horse and buggy trip. Maybe someone needs to go to the doctor, Costco or Walmart in a neighboring town and do a big sort of grocery run for your family, which is something that Amish ladies will get together and do fairly regularly. Amish even hire drivers to take them to other Amish communities, sometimes many miles away, sometimes out of state. With all the different Amish communities out there, they often have relatives or friends or family, or sometimes the youth travel. Your brother may have moved from Pennsylvania to Indiana, or someone's getting married in Wisconsin. And so that's pretty common. And when you're hiring an Amish taxi, it's pretty expensive. It's not that convenient. Usually you have to book the taxi driver in advance, unless you have a regular arrangement. Sometimes you can't find a taxi driver that easily. So they'll also accept rides from friends. I often drive my Amish friends places. They generally don't own cars, although some Amish business people are now owning their work vehicles, even though they don't personally drive them. An Amish contractor owning a work truck is a good example of that. So that's not widespread, I guess, but that's something that more Amish are doing now. The Amish use the horse and buggy for different reasons. The car was seen as something very modern when it came in. It makes travel easier. It makes it easier to leave your community, to leave your family, to go to other places, and in turn you become less sort of tied to or dependent on the community. For the Amish, the community and the family and the church are very important things. It's kind of the basis of their society. They don't think technology is evil. I did a video on that. They don't think the cars are evil. They feel cars are useful. They don't look down on non-Amish people for having cars. It's just a different lifestyle. It's a different set of choices on how to live and the outcome that you want to get from those choices. The Amish are known for the horse and buggy. That's kind of the primary form of transportation, even though in some communities, some Amish only use the horse and buggy maybe on Sundays going to church. That's the case in some larger settlements, some more business-oriented settlements, some of the more progressive settlements. The car and the buggy are also both quite symbolic. The car is modern, it's fast, it's high-tech, it represents progress. The buggy is in some ways symbolic of a more methodical, thoughtful form of transportation. Amish have specific styles of buggies that are connected with certain communities. The buggy has a lot to do with their identity. As tends to be the case with the Amish, there are often exceptions. The plainest of the Amish, like for example, the Swartzentruber Amish, do not hire cars, do not hire Amish taxis. They really only hire cars or ride in cars in emergency situations. That's one group that is very resistant to change. There are maybe a handful of exceptions in the other direction. Well, there's at least one community I'm aware of, maybe a couple, that permits members of the church to drive cars for work purposes. And there's a community in Kansas that fits that bill. So they don't own the cars and they don't drive them for personal purposes, but like a work truck, if an Amishman has a job in that particular quite small settlement, he could be permitted to drive that and use that for the purposes of work. And there's been some examples of that in Arthur, Illinois, starting in the 1950s, where some Amishmen began getting driver's licenses for the purpose of driving for work purposes. But that's basically died out there. So that's an exception in the other direction. My name's Eric Westner. I'm obviously not Amish, but I've visited dozens of Amish communities. I wrote a book on the Amish in 2010 about Amish businesses. Those Amish who don't ride in cars, that aren't able to hire an Amish taxi, say to visit another community in another state, how do they get around? Well, a lot of them will take like a Greyhound bus. So if you see Amish like at a Greyhound station, those are often like Swartzentruber Amish. There was an article in an Alabama newspaper a couple of years ago. Someone had found an Amishman that was waiting in a Greyhound station, or possibly Amtrak, That's another one Amish use. Kind of interviewed him about his who he was and where he was going, and I think it was a guy he was either from Mississippi and going to North Carolina, or he was from North Carolina going to Mississippi. Usually the ones you see like in a Greyhound are often the plainer Amish, not always, but that's kind of their main option for travel. That's sort of the public transport. They're able to do that. Some Amish youth will get cars. When you choose to be baptized is when you're officially a member of the church, and you don't have to be baptized. For a lot of the youth, they have, I'll talk about this in another video, but the period called Rumspringa, they're in their teens, they're in their early 20s, and they're not members of the church yet, so they kind of have greater latitude for some of them if they want to, use more technology, dress in a non-Amish way, get a non-Amish haircut, use a smartphone, those kinds of things. And some of them will get driver's licenses and will drive, will have cars. You can sometimes see cars parked behind Amish barns. Sometimes some Amish families have their sons are kind of like their drivers when they're in that period of time before they join church. So that happens. Not all Amish would be okay with their children, doing that. Just on the Rumspringa point, not to go on a tangent, but it's not as wild and crazy as it's frequently portrayed in the media, and I will talk about that in another video. There are some Amish that do maybe fit the bill of the wild behavior. They're not all necessarily angels in that period. If they're living at home with their parents, which most Amish do when they're in that period, most Amish youth do, then, there's also some house rules. So it's not like a free-for-all. I am aware of some Amish using Uber. So how did that happen? Well, some Amish are actually using their smartphones to use Uber. Some Amish in certain communities do have smartphones, okay? And Amish approach this in different ways. It's gray area in some places. It's forbidden in other places. Actually, I spoke with an Amishman who uses Uber, and he was kind of excited about it. He was like, "Oh, it's so easy," So I guess like we are, right? I mean, Uber it's a pretty handy solution, and he felt so too. And if you think about it, Uber's a pretty good solution for those Amish who are okay with hiring, Amish taxis. So there is some Uber usage among the Amish. So Amish can ride in cars. Most of them do. I've got a number of videos on the Amish and technology. I'll put a link to a playlist here. You can check those out. Can Amish fly in planes, the different Amish buggy colors, different things like that. Hit subscribe if you want to stay up to date with the videos. I put 2 of them out per week. Thanks for watching. See you next time.